2022 is in the can, and we emerge fully out of the pandemic doldrums with only one studio having a full-on meltdown. As it turns out, streaming is not the savior Hollywood was hoping for. A financially unsustainable revenue stream that's conditioned audiences to devalue the mid-budget, middle-brow programmers that used to be the bread and butter of the industry. A purge is coming, and I'm worried that everything not nailed to a pre-existing IP will be the first to be disposed of. Nevertheless, it's been an eclectic year for releases. Delayed 2020 blockbusters, sleeper horror hits, long-gestating stop-motion passion projects, and Hollywood trying to resurrect the star-driven studio comedy. Here is my top 10 favorite films of 2022. Note, this video reflects my opinions as of January 1st, 2023. While I absolutely love all 10 of these movies, there are still quite a few acclaimed releases from 22 that I have not seen. There is a letterboxd list in the description that will reflect any future changes. First, some honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut. After 2 exhausting years, everyone dreaded how Hollywood would depict the pandemic. Leave it to the director of Contagion to make a story about isolation and misanthropy during a lockdown into an entertaining throwback to paranoid techno-thrillers like Blowout and Enemy of the State. Steven Soderbergh has been underappreciated since he started making lower-key projects shot on iPhone, but he's still as slickly precise as ever regardless of his tools. Also, I'm just happy that David Koepp is back, baby! This one was a painful one to cut from the main list just because it deserves more than just to be buried by the HBO Max algorithm. Apollo 10½. Uncertainty about the future of auteur-driven filmmaking had turned 2022 into the year of the autobiographical nostalgia movie. Richard Linklater quietly opened up this cycle with a rotoscope animated film that's nostalgia porn, even by the standards of the guy who made Dazed and Confused. Damned if I didn't cry watching the Astrodome and the Home Run Spectacular being brought back to vivid life in their full glory.
On a 2-1, Alvarez hits a high drive center field. Veer leans back. This game is turned upside down.
This is the Houston of my father, aunts, and uncles. A sheltered middle-class existence, perhaps, but one full of wide-eyed optimism and imagination. Also, weirdly, one of 2 cartoon features this year from an Austin-based filmmaker about NASA sending kids into space. The Once and Future Smash. A film that's been making the festival rounds that I hope gets picked up by Shudder soon. It's Garth Marenghi's Dark Place by way of a fictional proto-Texas Chainsaw Massacre slasher that skewers about 4 different horror franchises all at the same time. Even as someone who finds a lot of horror fandom kinda cringe, this is one of the most fun theatrical experiences I had all year. X, Pearl, Barbarian, The Black Phone. While I'm not quite as in love with these films as the horror community, the genre has proven to be the last space where original stories can reliably succeed in a theatrical format, and that gives me hope. Even seeing the obnoxious trailer for Smile, a movie designed primarily to wring cheap jump scares out of teenagers, seemed to signal a return to normalcy. Okay, enough preamble, let's get to the list proper. Number 10. Confess, Fletch. Early in the year, my grandma talked about how much she enjoyed the subtle, funny sensibilities of the Sandra Bullock vehicle, The Lost City. I've only seen the trailer, and while we may have different definitions of the word subtle,
they're just sucking on my butt like a big old Jamba Juice.
I totally get where she's coming from. Confess, Fletch is in a similar vein, a comedy actually made for grown-ups. And I know, that makes me sound like a snobby boomer, but I can't tell you how long it's been since something so genuinely whip-smart and sexy came from a major studio. It's just so classically Hollywood. 2 charming leads with a fiery chemistry playing at a screwball whodunit that, if it weren't for the dashes of modernity, could have been directed by Howard Hawks 80 years ago.
Listen, I used to be an investigative reporter of some repute. I could be very helpful in this whole matter.
I used to play the trumpet in high school. I never offered advice to Miles Davis. Shut up and talk.
It's a very confusing combination of commands.
I can't tell you how it compares to the Chevy Chase films, but what I can tell you is that Confess Fletch is pure craft from top to bottom, and that we've utterly failed John Hamm. The guy is sculpted from marble and getting better with age, and yet can't seem to make it stick as the leading man. There were about 2 other people in the theater when I saw a 7 p.m. Sunday night showing on opening weekend, which means we're gonna get 2 more years of John Hamm pretending to be in love with a car insurance mascot instead of making a whole series of Fletch movies. Number 9. The Menu. A step above the recent crop of Eat the Rich thrillers, mostly because it uses its class themes to be about more than just the wealthy suck, am I right? Namely, the often contemptuous relationship between artist and audience. In fact, my theater's projector glitched out midway through, and for a second I thought the film was playing a similar trick on its audience as it had on its characters. Ray Fiennes is of course savory as the overclocked lunatic's chef.
It wasn't cod, you donkey.
Though Nicholas Hoult ends up upstaging everyone with a dryly hilarious take on a sycophantic fanboy that's part pathetic Elon Musk bro and part hot cuisine war boy. I'm willing to concede that the ending is a little too shallow and convenient of resolution, though in a weird way, Anya Taylor-Joy's protagonist valuing the basic function of food more than its artistic form reflects my own thoughts on the film's crowd-pleasing populism. In short, I was thoroughly entertained on a visceral level, a quality reflected in most of my top 10. Number 8. Inu-Oh. My rule of thumb is if I go to watch a movie at a theater, I want to see something I've never seen before. I kept putting off Bullet Train because there are about a dozen other serviceable crime fantasy films on Netflix. But as far as I know, there is only one animated glam rock opera adaptation of a medieval Japanese text that combines traditional No theater with David Bowie, Queen, Michael Jackson, and Kate Bush, and a story about the importance of art which gives a voice to the voiceless. Inu-Oh throws you into the deep end at the start, and it takes a while to get acclimated to its setting, even if you have a cursory knowledge of 14th century Japan. But it builds to a dazzling, foot-stomping delirium that resurrects a long-past era in our modern cultural language. Anime has been quietly making good theatrical money stateside, though this feature from Devilman Crybaby director Masayaka Yuasa just kinda came and went without much fanfare outside of a few critics. As much as I hate the Golden Globes, their nominations in Inu-Oh gives me hope that the film might build some award season momentum, and at the very least gain a wider audience. Number 7. EO. An unexpected through line running through much of my list is animal rights. EO is like one of those Animal Odyssey Disney movies a la Homeward Bound, except since this is a Polish art house movie, you know there's no happy ending when our titular donkey is reunited with his original owner. I'm not actually familiar with the work of Jerzy Skolimowski, but for an 84-year-old director coming off a decade-long hiatus, he takes to new filmmaking techniques like drone cameras very naturally. The film is told primarily from the donkey's point of view as he's sold or wanders into the lives of various humans, ranging from the cruel to the compassionate to the completely indifferent. Almost no context is given for these human stories, so the audience is just as out of the loop as the donkey. Skolimowski invites the viewer to project their personality onto EO, while also skewering those very ways we anthropomorphize animals. Because in the end, EO is just that, a stubborn ass. He just wants to eat carrots, not be bound by menial work, and experience the love and tenderness that only his original owner could offer. Though one could say that also sums up human beings as well. Number 6. Mad God. Straight up the most densely imaginative movie of the year. Mad God can refer both to the wizards in the film who create Boschian abominations out of literal dust, or director and actual effects wizard Phil Tippett, who slavishly crafted and animated this nightmarish stop-motion film over the course of 30 years. It's hard to describe Mad God the movie because there is so little concrete story to begin with. It's a purely experiential narrative, something that burrows deep within your psyche, exposing the collective despair we've all been feeling as fragile, disposable beings, consumed by an uncaring clockwork world. Mad God is a labor of love, and of pure malevolence. Number 5. The Northman. Robert Eggers is becoming a lot like Wes Anderson. His worlds are so immaculately crafted, and his sense of place so transportative that the question of style versus substance is kinda beside the point. There is not an ounce of modern affect here. No narrative voice to anchor the audience in a familiar moralism. No trite, anachronistic #girlboss archetype to soften the edges of a society defined by extreme masculinity. And while the comparisons to the twins of 1981, Excalibur and Conan the Barbarian, are apt, the Northman crucially lacks the individualism that drove those stories. This is an era, both in terms of its people and the narratives they told, where the concept of individualistic choice did not exist. Instead, everyone plays the role that fate cast them as, without erring, their own personal will being indistinguishable from the gods. It's alien to our secular sensibilities, but presented with a visceral immediacy that Eggers' other films haven't had. Intellectually, you're like, oh yes, these men are hot-headed morons destroying the lives of everyone around them. I'm very much glad we live in a much more enlightened times. But on a deep, primal level, you feel the raw power of the gods flowing through you as you watch two naked men fight to the death on top of an active volcano. Number 4. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Every bit as beautifully grotesque as you would want from a Guillermo del Toro adaptation of Pinocchio, and it's even stranger than that.
What is this? What kind of sorcery?
You wanted me to live. You asked for me to live!
Pinocchio gets crucified, meets a biblically accurate angel of death, and does a whole musical number praising Benito Mussolini, voiced by SpongeBob SquarePants himself, Tom Kenny,
I like puppets.
complete with goose steps and Sieg Heil salutes. And then, more daring than all of that, the Catholic Church is depicted as being totally complicit in upholding that very fascist rule. Lead it to GDT to make his most provocative film a children's movie. I was lucky enough to catch this in a theater, and normally I would chastise Netflix for giving this such a limited theatrical run, but I kinda don't blame them. This is somehow a tougher sale than even the oppressively dour Nightmare Alley. Though that switch to stop motion, blended seamlessly with digital effects by co-director Mark Gustafsson, allows Del Toro to create a pure restraint of all his thematic fixations. Number 3. Nope. After Us, I think a lot of people went into this expecting a cryptic puzzle to be parsed over multiple viewings. The marketing even leaned into that, teasing all the way Peele could subvert the classic alien invasion blockbuster film. But as it turns out, the great subversion is that there is no subversion. This is an equal parts rollicking and horrifying sci-fi adventure from a master filmmaker fully blossomed in his craft. The scene where Stephen Yeun relives his childhood trauma by breathlessly recalling a Saturday Night Live sketch making light of the incident is easily the best movie moment of the year.
But every time Gordy hears something about the jungle, Gordy, Catan, goes off. And it's Catan. He's just crushing it. He is a force of nature. He is killing on that stage. Yeah.
You can tell Jordan Peele has contempt for that kind of exploitative comedy, but also genuinely admires the SNL players of the late 90s, because that's when he himself decided to be a sketch comic. And that reveal of the true nature of the alien entity is one of the most unsettling things I've seen in a horror film since, well, the reveal in Jordan Peele's last movie. Instead of expanding into a mess of intersecting metaphors and philosophical tangents, Nope is much more content playing on an immediate and primal level, which certainly fits the film's motif for trained animals bursting into a sudden frenzy. Some may be disappointed with that, but I had a total blast. I mean, it's really hard for me to not love a movie where Michael Wincott does a spoken word rendition of the Purple People Eater.
He was a one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. One-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. One-eyed, next to me.
Number 2. RRR. 2022 also saw the word maximalist enter the popular lexicon. Overwhelming, weighty spectacle, broad, completely earnest emotions, and no movie embodied that more than RRR. Rise, roar, revolt. This is a movie that features an assault on a British palace led by an entire zoo's worth of wild animals, where the two leads, characterized by elements, literally duel each other with fire and water. When one of them refuses to literally bend the knee to his colonial masters, even while being publicly whipped, it instantly inspires a rousing revolutionary anthem. And of course, let's not forget the opening salvo of Beam and Rom's rebellion, a dance-off against a bunch of stuffy, rhythmless Englishmen. Seriously, if I made a list of my favorite individual movie moments of the year, 8 out of 10 of them would be from RRR.
Go!
I was a bit worried going in that I would be lost among the cultural references only Indian audiences would get. But as it turns out, watching the British get freaking wrecked in imaginative, acrobatic action sequences is pretty universal. Hollywood used to be proficient at putting out these kinds of 100% earnest, chest-beating populist blockbusters. And sure enough, when director S.S. Rajamouli dropped his Sight and Sound favorite movie list later in the year, it included the likes of Forrest Gump, Ben-Hur, Django Unchained, and of course, Braveheart. RRR is somehow the spiritual successor to every single one of those films. It was funny seeing word of mouth for this spread among film Twitter, as if it was some sort of underseen cult film, and not the biggest Indian movie production ever made. But it goes to show, A, just how strictly segregated international film has been from American audiences, and B, that after a decade of Marvel dominance, people are hungry for a different kind of spectacle cinema. RRR, and a bunch of other movies from 2022, have more than delivered. Number 1. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once arrived at a perfect confluence of cultural events. Michelle Yeoh is having a career renaissance, Hollywood is making a genuine push for more diverse voices, comic book multiverses have gone mainstream, and 2 years of pandemic life in an increasingly fractured media environment has people feeling like they are occupying multiple planes of reality. Like the Y2K anxieties that begat The Matrix, time was ripe for a film that marries heady sci-fi and philosophical concepts to a story that's nevertheless grounded in Universal. Also, like RRR, it's a movie about revolt, a rallying cry for consciousness and kindness against a world that pulls us to be unfeeling and uncaring. It also has a scene where Short Round whips a bunch of ass with a fanny pack. I already have a whole 3,000 word video essay script written up for Everything Everywhere, so I'll save the rest of my thoughts for that. But suffice to say, this is a generation-defining film, brimming with imagination and an inventive DIY filmmaking. No other 2022 release comes close.